Okay, so we're ready to talk about this last part where we go into the 5 stages of inflation. Not the 5 stages of inflation, I guess it's the 5 stages of our finances as they go through inflation. We're talking about inflation like it's stages of grief, right? In the end, you just accept that things are...
Oh, geez. There's that sound effect again, dialect.
Yeah, well, I always think of, for my old school film heads, the end of Big Trouble in Little China, where the bad guy, just like out of rage, just starts to inflate, and eventually just explodes.
Oh, my God. Let's not have that happen, y'all.
I think that's what we're trying to do here, is to find the pinprick to relieve the pressure.
Yes, exactly. So this is part 3 of inflation. And in part 3, it's all about what you can do, right? So we want you to, over our 5 stages to financial legacy, really think about and figure out what stage you're in. And we're going to go through all of the stages and then what you can do within each stage when it comes to inflation.
Yeah, to remind you, in the safety stage, the first stage, this is looking like you are unsure where your money is going, you have bills that feel out of control, your debt feels unmanageable, you don't really have savings. If you have savings, it's kind of fake savings.
Yeah, it's savings that feels like it's always going up and down and you're always dipping into it.
Well, savings that you haven't declared, this is for me to save, is always fake savings, because that's not savings, that's just money you ain't spent yet.
Yes, yeah. So if this stage resonates with you, a high inflation environment is going to be pretty tough in this stage, right? And really, when you're in the safety stage, it can feel like you don't really have control of anything.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't control inflation. You can't control prices rising, but we want you to figure out what you can control. Is it your expenses? Is it your income?
And a lot of this is just figuring out what you can control. Moving into the doing the control part is the next step. So give yourself a little bit of grace and just pay attention to what you can do. Is it at your expenses, like you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. So we talked in the last episode about, now is the time to ask for a raise. Now is the time to ask for a raise that's more than you've asked for before, because raises should be commensurate with, how inflation is rising. And so it may be time to ask for a raise. It may be time to start thinking about getting a second source of income. Can you cut your expenses temporarily in this stage? And regardless of what your money personality is, you may have to track your spending more closely with this high inflation environment. Regardless.
This may, when you're talking about spending values matrix and things like that, this may require looking into your details and making a cut on your budget for your details. Maybe there's one less detail that you can have. Maybe you need to cut in half the amount that you're spending on these details. This sucks because I know a lot of your savings goals are tied to you being able to feed yourself a little bit with these details and feeling proud that you're able to raise the floor on your details, or at least raise the ceiling on your details, while also raising the floor on your savings. And it's tough when you have to choose one against the other. But we want to make sure that we're increasing our savings, especially in this stage. So it might take a temporary cut. And I want you to remember that. I want you to remember the stuff that you cut. Remember if you miss it. Remember if you don't miss it. If you don't really miss it, then maybe it can be cut out completely. If you really miss it, then start making those plans where you can continue to increase the savings at the rate that you set. Keep your plan together for that. And also get back to that place where you're spending on the thing that matters to you.
The other thing in this stage, when it comes to inflation, in the safety stage, and talking about income in general, is this is a time to figure out, what is your ideal income? What is that income that you need to make to get you to the next stage? And are you there? Or do you need to figure out how to make more money to get there?
And this might be a small thing, like you need to talk about getting a raise, you need to increase your rates, or it might be a time when you need to start making plans to change the spot you're in, maybe change your entire industry.
Yeah.
Maybe it's time to go for it. You know that thing that you want to go for and you kind of been preparing for, but you've got this other thing and you're like, well, this job that I have right now, it's stable and it's paying me. But if it's not actually enough in times of crisis, then it's not worth it. Now is not the time to make the big swing because you don't have the thing behind you to make sure you're going to be all right. But now is definitely 100% the time to make that plan, because it's going to make it worth it when you go through the hard days.
Yeah. And when it comes to figuring out what that ideal income is, right? And even before making those swings, even before thinking about it, do you know if you're making enough money? Because often we feel like we're not making enough. I could be making more. You could always be making more. But giving yourself that concrete number to be working towards and that goal to be working towards, especially when you're in the safety stage, is critical, because then you know what your next goalpost is. You know what your next milestone is. So you know how big of a swing you have to take.
And I'm pulling back to these details. Really, really and truly, if you don't have any other metric that's working for you, if your details are not being met, that means that you're not making enough.
Yeah. Exactly.
So we want to move on to the next stage in stability. And to remind you again, stability looks like you have a savings cushion, but it's only a cushion. It's not like a full sofa, barely an armoire. You got debt still, but your debt is not increasing or not increasing at a great rate. You're learning a little bit more about investing, but you're not really up in it. But you're still one paycheck away from financial trouble, like a lot of folks.
Yeah. And the thing about stability, the thing about this stage in particular, is it's still precarious, right? Your finances are stable day to day. You're making your bills. You're able to spend money on your details. You're able to put away some money for saving. But you still have that paycheck to paycheck feeling, right?
Yo, can we rap about the paycheck to paycheck thing real quick? Because that's been popping up a lot. I've been seeing in the media. People have been saying, well, so many people who make 200 grand are living paycheck to paycheck. And other people are like, well, so what? They're still making 200 grand, so we shouldn't care about them. Paycheck to paycheck doesn't mean anything. And we're kind of losing something that I think is a very important term that's helpful for us to understand where we're at.
Yeah, I'm glad that you paused there, because I think that paycheck to paycheck is something that it's tricky, because everyone's needs and wants and desires when it comes to what they want their lifestyle to be are different, right? And $200,000 of income for one person can mean, oh my God, I'm putting away so much money in savings. I'm able to hit all my goals. And for other people, it can mean they're living paycheck to paycheck.
Well, the thing of it is 200 grand a year, right? We're just pulling this number out. It's no specific metric for any sort of success, but it's a big number, right? And it's a lot. And if you are making 50 grand right now, and I were to tell you tomorrow you're going to go to 200,000, you will very easily be able to I'm going to put half of that in savings.
I'm going to put 3/4 of it in savings, right?
But that's not how it works.
Yeah.
50 becomes 70, becomes 90, becomes 110. And all along the way, you keep giving yourself, here's an extra allowance, or I'm working later, or more is expected of me, so I'm going to go on this extra thing, or I'm extra burnt out, so I add this extra vacation. Mm-hmm. And by the time you get to 200 grand, you, whether you're a paper chaser or not, as we talk about money personalities, because they tend to do this, but most of us have filled up all of those areas without realizing we've done so. So it feels natural. This is that creep, the scope creep.
Yes, the lifestyle creep. You literally just described lifestyle creep dialect, because you're right. The income doesn't go from 50 grand to 200 grand, right? It increases incrementally, and an extra $10,000 a year is like a couple extra $100 a paycheck. So if you're not paying attention and you're not setting that money aside or having a plan for what to do with that extra income, it gets spent. It just does.
And I'm not asking you to have sympathy or empathy for these folks who are making a bunch of money and are doing a thing that you think is spending money frivolously. I need you to pay attention to your own finances and see where that creep could creep up on you.
Yeah, exactly. And this is why, especially because if you've started spending more for convenience, or if you started spending more because things felt easier, or you developed a habit that you didn't have before, it's hard to go back on that, because a lot of habits that we develop without thinking are usually out of convenience or peer pressure, or it was easier, or I'm tired, this job, these extra responsibilities make it so that I don't have time to cook dinner, make it so that I don't have time to make lunch, right? All of those things make it so that I want to get a pedicure every week, whatever that is for you. And so this lifestyle creep tends to happen because we feel more pressure often when we make more income.
You remember when you went into the other room to get something, and then you went into that room and you forgot what you were there to get? That's what lifestyle creep is. And I can't assign some moral failing or positivity. It's just a thing that happens, and it happens under your nose. And we want you to be able to backtrack, take a minute, breathe, and figure out what's happening so you can deal with it.
Yes. So if you are in the stability stage and it still feels like you're living paycheck to paycheck, even though maybe you're making more money than you ever have, more money than your family has, right? If it feels like that, then this is the time, especially when prices are rising, to really examine your spending values matrix and to really be clear on what your details are and be really clear on the type of spending that you were doing, where you were like, oh, I didn't even know that was happening. Like, I didn't know that I started buying lunch every day because all of a sudden I could afford to. I didn't know that I was taking Ubers both ways to work instead of taking the subway, right? I didn't know XYZ. You don't notice those things unless you look back and you start to notice patterns. And so this is the time to really do that, especially because making cuts when it comes to inflation, making expense cuts, this is the time to really do that so that you can still maintain spending money on the things that you do really value. Today's episode is sponsored by us, Brunch and Budget. Brunch and Budget is not just a podcast. It's a financial planning practice with a team of certified financial planners and accredited financial counselors ready to work with people who need a safe space to talk about your finances. Many of our clients come to us because someone or something made them feel bad about their money. We are the antidote to that. We do all our financial planning and coaching through a racial wealth equity lens, and we'll use our very own 5 stages to financial legacy to show you how far you've come and where you're headed. Go to brunchandbudget.com to learn more.
Speaking of maintaining, let's move on to the next stage, sustainability. Because we're in sustainability, this is where it gets a little trickier because this is where you start thinking in inflation that what you're doing isn't working because you're not getting better or you're not improving in a lot of ways that you think you should. Because to remind y'all, sustainability, it's like where you're establishing your habits, you're getting your savings floor together, you're auto paying your bills because you feel comfortable about the money you got, your debt is decreasing, you got investments going on, and your retirement investments in particular are things that you're starting to fill out and starting to make happen. So when inflation comes, it starts to feel like, wait, am I not really in this stage?
Right, totally. Because the thing is, in sustainability, that established habits and savings thing is a real thing, right? In sustainability, you're like, okay, I feel like I got this, right? I feel like that I'm comfortable and I feel like that I can, ease my way into figuring out and have time to figure out how to get to the next stage. But when inflation hits, it's this weird feeling of like, for some people in the sustainability stage, you won't feel it as much right away because you have room, right? In sustainability, that's the key marker, I feel like, is you feel like you have room in your finances. And things can feel abstract in terms of like, oh, I noticed my grocery bill has gone up, but it hasn't affected your day to day. So what does that mean?
Yeah, I see a lot of folks who are in this stage, whether it's inflation, recession, whatever, whenever there is a big negative downturn, they start going back into those old habits and in that old mentality of like, oh, I don't have enough. I'm not there. What I do is not sustainable. It even when their bank account is fine, they can still afford the stuff that they're getting. It feels like such an intense slide back that people panic.
Yeah, especially if you're a complicator, especially if you're someone who's like, wait, I didn't plan for this, even though I planned for everything, right? It's like, actually, you did, though. And the other thing, too, is it's okay if you're in the stage and you feel like you need to go back to some of your habits in the previous stage, right? In stability. Because in sustainability, often what happens is because you're comfortable and things are working and things are systematized and there's room, is you're able to let go of some of the habits that allowed you to get to this stage, right? The habits around like, watching every expense, tracking every dollar, and it might make you feel better to go back to those habits. And also, if you just got to the sustainability stage and that stage is feeling precarious, or you feel like that you're sliding back into the stability stage, reminding yourself, one, that you were there before and you knew how to get out of it, right? And you knew how to get to the next stage. And two, that these stages are fluid and they often change back and forth depending on things that are outside of your control. Losing your job, inflation, a recession, the market downturns. There are a lot of things out of your control that, can push you between different stages, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think the big difference is those of you who've been in the sustainability spot, you've got these habits that you don't have to pause on. You may have to lower the numbers that you're using, but you've already got these established things and you keep rocking with those. I think that's what's really important. If you have a savings rate or a spending rate that is now too high, you cut that number, but you keep the action. Because remember, the habits that we do are through repeated actions, not through increasing amounts.
Yes.
So when we're in the more powerful stages, right? Stage 4, we're in independence and we get to make some more decisions. To remind y'all, this is when you're working because you want to, not because you have to. You don't have to worry at all about things like credit card debt. You can fund extended time off. You're starting to look towards, you know, being a community sharer,
Yeah.
uplifterer, this stuff that is everyone's problem is now your problem, not because you got to worry about your wallet, but because you got to worry about your people's.
Yeah, like in the independent stage, when you cross from sustainability to independence, this is where that generational wealth building really happens, right? This is where you don't have to wait until the next generation even to build wealth. You've built enough of it now where you can start thinking about what it might look like to redistribute it even in your lifetime. You know, if
So what does that mean right now?
yes, absolutely.
Right? We're like thinking about redistributing, but also things are on fire and there's a billion GoFundMe's.
Yeah, exactly. So
It's probably not an exaggeration. I wonder how many actual GoFundMe's are out right now.
Let's not look it up.
I was going to look it up.
I don't want to know. So the thing about the independent stage is it's a big stage, right? There are people who just are entering the independent stage. There are people who have been living in it for years. And so one is to make sure that you can stay in the independent stage, right? Will inflation affect any long-term plans to be able to maintain financial independence? Will it affect your ability to work because you want to, not because you have to? Will it affect your ability to stay off of credit cards? Will it affect your ability to, you know, get to that next like career or life milestone that you want to get to? And so now is the time to revisit your long-term plans and calculate the what if scenario around what if inflation stayed like this for the next 5 years or the next 10 years? Does that affect your investments? Does that affect how you need to invest and also how much money you might be taking from your investments, right? And then once you figure that out and you feel solid on that, then are you in a position to support other people in this time? We don't know how long this is going to last, but depending on how deep you are in the independent stage, it's going to affect whether you're able to stay in financial independence or if you need to change course. It's going to affect whether you're able to help your community now and how much you're able to help your community, or if you need to figure out and assess like how you need to put your own oxygen mask on first, right? And so the financial independence stage, you know, that's that crossing over onto the other side of like, hey, I'm going to be good whether or not there's a ton of inflation. And are you there yet?
So Pam,
Uh-oh.
So
you looked it up, didn't you? You looked it up.
I needed to look. I needed to know.
I was like, wow, I haven't heard dialect chime in a while. I wonder what's going on.
I was researching. I was looking stuff up. So you could take this a couple of different ways. I wasn't able to find how many active accounts there are because I guess they didn't want to share that. But they've got their little giving report that they put together, GoFundMe, in 2021. And I know that they're not the only company that does this stuff.
Sure.
But I really think that this is kind of cool. So GoFundMe, the communities, they said, has the GoFundMe community, all of these communities, they've raised $15 billion since 2010.
$15 billion.
That's a huge amount of money, right? $15 billion in 12 years.
Yeah.
So that's, you know, a million and change, or no, excuse me, 100 million and change.
No, that's $1 billion a year. Wait, what's the math?
No, it's 10 years. Yeah, so it's like 15 billion.
Yeah.
I don't know. In my head, I was like 1.5 billion.
Too many zeros, y'all.
But yeah, 15 billion. So it's like $1 billion a year, right? Which is like
$1.5 billion a year.
Astronomical, except when you think about municipal budgets. Think about yearly municipal budgets. Think about, come on, we gonna go there. We live there. Think about how much your city increased their police budget just this year. Think about how much that blows away the billion-ish dollars that people raised around the country for each other over the course of the year. I want you to remember this because, yes, we are wonderful, powerful people who care about each other and we put a lot of our money into these things. But look at how, with a simple stroke of a pen, our united power of our government backed by our tax dollars could take care of a lot of these problems. My people in the independent stage, you don't have to be Rockefellers today. You don't have to go and save everybody. Even the GoFundMe community, which is a big business that's built off the back of this, is like, hey, We raise $1 billion a year collectively. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
I want you to remember that what you do is a significant contribution. If you feel like it's not enough, then it's probably enough.
Yeah. Whew. All right. It was worth looking it up.
I know. We got messy on the math, but it's all right.
So the final stage is financial legacy, the fifth and final stage. And financial legacy looks like your investments are funding your lifestyle. You're contributing significantly to your community. You don't need a credit score. You got it like that.
You don't need any of that.
You
right?
don't need any of that.
You don't even need credit, like people crediting you for things. You're just like, yeah,
no.
I just do it.
Oh, no. And so the thing about the legacy stage is you might actually be benefiting from inflation depending on what you're invested in, depending on what your business is, depending on what's going on, right? If the work that you're involved in, how you make profits, rising rents, rising cost of goods, those kinds of things are things that you might be making money off of in the legacy stage.
A lot of the stuff that's like, oh, it's super harmful for the rest of us. In the legacy position, you're benefiting from these things. You're invested enough heavily in these companies that are raising their rates and making record profits.
Yeah.
You may or may not be on a board where you can make decisions about how exploitative they can be. You might just be an investor where you're making money off of it, so you don't have as much, real for real voice in that. But you do have a lot of power right now.
Yes, exactly. So just because inflation is rising doesn't mean that you have to participate in it. If you have, and especially when it comes to legacy and independence in general, we are big believers in figuring out how to support your local community, how to support the people immediately around you. If that means that you're a business owner, can you make sure that your employees' cost of living is at least 7%? Can you make sure their raises are keeping up with inflation every year? If you're a landlord, can you make sure that your rent increases are based on last year's inflation rates and not this year's inflation rates?
Today's episode is sponsored by us, PocketChange. At PocketChange, we offer in-person and virtual workshops for students from grade school to grad school, professional development for educators and administrators, and jams for the whole family to learn, unlearn, and unpack. We use hip-hop pedagogy in the classroom to meet students where they're at, and hip-hop performance in the communities to dispel myths and create new common sense around money. For some free resources, go to pocketchange.com/toolkit and sign up for our newsletter. Let's change the way we talk about finance. Last episode, we were talking about the money personalities, right? And we were talking about how the paper chasers, y'all tend to be entrepreneurs, and we want you to focus on problem solving rather than trying to exploit. And I think regardless of your money personality, when you're in this kind of position, this gives you the opportunity to do that, to figure out. And this is the cool thing. It's why we call it legacy, because this is the big mark you can make on the world in this time. Maybe history will remember you, maybe they won't, but it's a big mark you can make right now. You can do something that will change stuff. You can set a rate and be, wow, look at this maverick setting this rate that's lower. Everyone is always nervous about this, and I'm nervous about it too. The whole Mark Cuban thing where he started his own drug company or like this website where you could get drugs for cheaper and things like that. I don't know enough about it to be like, yes, it's definitely perfectly going to work out right. But just these types of intentions where you're like, I'm going to do something that's going to benefit folks, and this is going to be a part of who I am. This might help heal from some of the trauma of getting to the legacy stage, because we have to go through a lot of stuff to get up in there. And there's a lot of things that feel like they're selfish. A lot of times when you get to the independence and legacy stage, you have had to put yourself first to the degree where you may feel like you've neglected family, communities, and things like that. And this is a great way for you to figure out what you still have as pain points and do some healing for yourself and your peoples.
Yeah. And I love that you said that, because I feel like that when we think about the phrase redistributing wealth, it starts with like, I made these profits and I made this wealth because I took more money than I should have from other people, right? And I think that when it comes to this idea of profits, is there a way for you to redistribute wealth that isn't you literally like taking money from someone else and saying, oh, wait, let me give it out to some other people, but instead to say, hey, I'm going to give my employees raises. I'm going to lower the rent. I'm going to redistribute wealth in a way that looks like lower profits this year. That looks like I take less money for myself this year.
That's funny because the way you're saying it sounds really mundane, and it doesn't make you a superhero.
That's it. It doesn't make you a philanthropist, right?
Well, I think about like when we talk about redistributing wealth, and maybe this should be like a special episode, but I always think of like the end of some movie where someone is dressed up like Santa Claus throwing out bags of money to the common people and stuff like that.
Right,
and
exactly.
Like superhero worshipy and stuff like that. And
it's like, but it's money that you took from them in the first place.
Or that people who you work with took from them in the first place. Yeah, it's more boring usually.
It is. And the thing about the legacy stage that's tricky, and the thing about getting to the legacy stage and the independent stage that's tricky is, where is the line between profitable and equitable, right?
Ooh.
I know.
I thought the rhymes were my job.
Where is that line for you? And that's a thing that I encourage you to examine as you're on your way to this stage and not when you get here, right? Because it's not about getting to the legacy stage as fast as possible. It's about getting to this legacy stage in a way that leaves your community better than you found it.
So just like planning for your spending, planning for your saving, planning for these big purchases you want to have, the big things you want to be able to do for yourself, you want to make a plan for the mundane ways in which you're going to change your game up when you don't have to have your foot on the pedal.
Yes, exactly. I love it. So those are the 5 stages, y'all, the 5 stages in inflation. We love to go through all of the 5 stages so you can really see, one, where you've been, where you are, and where you need to go.
I like that you said 1 and then just paused for the other numbers. They were implied other numbers.
They were implied, yeah.
You can use letters or other types of symbols, whatever it is. That,
filling it with emojis, you know.
Is your numeration. So is that all that we want to tell folks today?
I think so. We got a song to go out, Tyler. That was a lot.
It was a lot. It was a lot. Getting through these 5 stages during inflation is pretty tough, but it's going to be okay as long as you keep your eyes on the prize. And the prize is the plan. And the plan is what we do to make sure that we don't get surprised. We're going to leave you with, I was trying to find exactly where these cats are from, but I always have trouble with this. So the label is from Geneva, Switzerland, where they have all the comic conventions, right? That's what Geneva is known for. This is a crew called The Disciples with the Culture Warriors and Johnny Osborne. I'm not sure if they're Swiss as well, but they got a dub reggae, John, about inflation called Inflation. And we'll check you next time. Thanks for listening.
Inflation blues now, and I get confused. This is recession blues, y'all. Hey. The mothers are crying, the children are crying too. So stop all your talking and do what you got to do. The children are plenty. Dollars are very few. You see, I got them brand new socks, but I just can't afford new shoes. Cabado. Inflation blues right now, and I need new shoes, yeah. Inflation blues, y'all. But where is the love that you promised in your song? Be a way that we can work it out.
Thanks for listening to the Brunch and Budget podcast. Please feel free to rate us, debate us, hate us, date us, infatuate us, something that means you like us but rhymes with 8. Say what's up. Tell us we make great stuff on Apple Podcasts or really anywhere that lets you comment, Reddit, YouTube. I don't know. Just tell somebody, like just knock on your neighbor's door. Subscribe, add us to your archives. Feel free to share any episodes that you think will help somebody out. Help us expand our circle so we can bring the real to more communities. If you got a song about money, financial systems, or how you feel about either, please send a link or MP3 to dialect@dialect.com. Figuring out how to spell it is your only real obstacle. We love some informational, intentional, influential songs from indie artists.